The rain had barely stopped when 10-year-old Cale Beaumont, heir to a billion-dollar empire, found himself sinking helplessly into a pit of cold, choking mud. His wheelchair tilted dangerously, the wheels swallowed whole as terrified tears blurred his vision. People saw him. People stared. Some even filmed. But nobody stepped forward. Not even the nanny paid to protect him, who stood under the pavilion scrolling on her phone, dry and comfortable, pretending not to hear his desperate cries. "Please, someone, please help me," Cale whispered, voice breaking. And then Sky appeared. A thin black girl in soaked sneakers, shivering in a torn hoodie, but with a heart bigger than everyone watching. She didn't hesitate. She didn't fear the mud. She didn't care who he was. She ran straight toward him. "I've got you," she whispered, pushing against the sinking chair with all her strength. Just as she fought to free him, a sleek black Mercedes screeched to a stop. The billionaire himself leapt out, fury blazing in his eyes. "Get away from my son," he shouted. The same billionaire who had chosen building wealth over raising the only child he had, who believed expanding his empire mattered more than the lonely boy sinking in the mud right in front of him. "Now, let me take you back. Back to the loneliness this little boy has been living in. And the cruel things the nanny has been doing behind closed doors." Because what Sky did that day didn't just save a child. It exposed everything. Before we dive into this story, tell us where in the world you're watching from and what time it is right now. Someone near you might be watching too. And don't forget to subscribe to support and appreciate the work we do on this channel. Cale's eyes opened to sunlight cutting through expensive curtains. The mansion was silent. Too silent. He tried to move, but his legs wouldn't respond. They never did. His small hands reached for the wheelchair beside his bed, pulling himself into it with practiced effort. Every morning started the same way. "Alone. Dad?" His voice came out weak, almost a whisper. No answer. The house was massive. 40 rooms. Gold fixtures. Marble floors. Paintings worth more than most people earned in a lifetime. But none of it could buy what Cale needed most. Someone who cared. Miss Hargrove appeared in the doorway, her face twisted in annoyance. She wasn't looking at him. Her eyes were glued to her phone, scrolling, tapping, completely absorbed. "Don't start whining," she snapped without even glancing up. "You're fine." Cale's chest tightened. He wasn't fine. He needed help getting dressed. He needed breakfast. He needed someone to just notice him. "Miss Hargrove, I said you're fine." She tossed a blanket onto the chair beside him like she was throwing trash. "Stop making everything difficult." Cale's words died in his throat. He rolled his wheelchair to the window, staring out at the garden. The grass sparkled with morning dew. Birds sang. The world outside looked beautiful, alive, free. He was trapped. Not by his wheelchair. Not by his disability. By neglect. His father, Richard Beaumont, was somewhere in the mansion. Cale could hear his voice echoing down the hallway, sharp, commanding, powerful. Richard was always busy. Always on a call. Always making deals, building empires, controlling millions. But he couldn't spare 5 minutes for his son. Cale pressed his forehead against the cold glass. He'd learned not to cry. Crying only made Miss Hargrove angrier. It made his father uncomfortable. So he swallowed the pain, buried it deep, and pretended everything was okay. But it wasn't okay. The mansion felt like a prison made of gold. Every room was perfect, polished, designed to impress. But there was no warmth. No laughter. No love. Just silence. Miss Hargrove walked past him again, still on her phone, laughing at something a friend said. She didn't even look at him. To her, Cale wasn't a child who needed care. He was a job. An inconvenience. A burden. Cale hugged his knees, pulling them close to his chest even though he couldn't feel them. His heart ached in a way his body couldn't. He wished someone would see him. Really see him. Not the wheelchair. Not the disability. Not the Beaumont name or the money. Just him. But today, like every other day, no one did. The mansion was silent again. And Cale was alone. Breakfast at the Beaumont mansion was supposed to be perfect. Crystal glasses. Fine china. Silver spoons that cost more than most people's rent. But perfection meant nothing when it came with cruelty. Miss Hargrove slammed a plate in front of Cale. Toast. Orange juice. Nothing else. Eat, she ordered, already turning away. Cale reached for the glass, his hands shaking slightly. The wheelchair made everything harder. Simple tasks became challenges. But he'd learned to adapt. The glass slipped. Milk splashed across the table, dripping onto his lap. Miss Hargrove spun around, her face twisted with rage. Are you serious? She grabbed a towel and threw it at him. Do you know how expensive that tablecloth is? Be careful, or you'll ruin everything. Cale's throat went dry. I'm sorry, Sorry doesn't clean up messes. She wiped the table aggressively, muttering under her breath. Useless. Absolutely useless. Cale stared down at his toast. His appetite vanished. He wanted to say something. Wanted to defend himself. But the words wouldn't come. They never did around her. Miss Hargrove pulled out her phone, laughing at a text from a friend. Her whole mood shifted instantly, warm, bubbly, human. Just not with him. Cale chewed his toast slowly, each bite tasteless. The dining room was enormous, filled with expensive furniture and artwork. But it felt empty. Cold. He glanced at the jar of strawberry jam on the counter. His favorite. It sat there, just out of reach. Can I have some jam? He asked quietly. Miss Hargrove didn't even look up from her phone. No. But I said no. Her voice was sharp, final. You have enough. Stop asking for things. Cale's fingers tightened around the toast. His chest felt heavy, like something was pressing down on him. Around him, everything screamed wealth. The chandelier above cost more than most cars. The chairs were imported from Italy. The walls were decorated with paintings from famous artists. But none of it mattered. What good was luxury when you were treated like trash? What good was money when you couldn't buy kindness? Miss Hargrove continued scrolling, completely unbothered. To her, Cale's feelings didn't exist. His needs were annoying. His presence was a burden. Cale finished his toast in silence, swallowing each bite like it was glass. He thought about his father. Richard was probably in his office right now, making calls, signing papers, building his empire. Too busy to notice his son was drowning. Too busy to care. Miss Hargrove stood up, stretching. Clean up your crumbs, she said, not even looking at the mess she'd made with the towel. And don't make me repeat myself. She left the room, her heels clicking against the marble floor. Cale sat alone at the massive dining table, surrounded by wealth that meant nothing. He wiped a crumb off the table with his small hand, his movements slow, defeated. This was his life. Gold cages. Cold hearts. Endless silence. And no one to hear him scream. Cale's eyes caught movement outside the window. A butterfly. Its wings were bright orange, dancing in the sunlight. It landed on a flower in the garden, delicate and free. Cale's heart lifted for the first time all morning. "Miss Hargrove?" His voice was soft, hopeful. "Can I go outside? Just for a minute? I want to see the garden." Miss Hargrove's head snapped toward him. Her eyes flashed with anger. "What did you just say?" Cale's breath caught. I just wanted to stay here." She marched toward him, her finger jabbing toward the wall like a weapon. "You have no business outside." "None. But I only." "Enough." Her voice exploded through the room, sharp enough to make him flinch. "Do you think I'm your servant? Do you think I'm here to cater to your every whim?" Cale shrank back in his wheelchair. His hands gripped the armrests, knuckles white. "I just wanted to see the butterfly," he whispered. Miss Hargrove leaned down, her face inches from his. Her breath was hot, her words like venom. "You want to go outside? Fine. But if you keep asking, you'll lose breakfast. You'll lose your toys. You'll lose everything. Do you understand me?" Tears stung Cale's eyes, but he refused to let them fall. He'd learned that crying only made things worse. "Answer me," she demanded. "Yes," Cale choked out. "I understand." "Good." She straightened up, smoothing her shirt like nothing had happened. "Now sit there and be quiet. I don't want to hear another word from you." She walked away, leaving Cale alone in the center of the room. The butterfly was still outside, floating from flower to flower. Free. Alive. Everything Cale wasn't. He stared at it through the glass, his chest aching. The mansion around him was massive. 40 rooms. Endless hallways. A garden that stretched for acres. But he couldn't explore any of it. Every door felt locked. Every window felt like a barrier. Curiosity was supposed to be natural for kids. It was supposed to lead to learning, growth, adventure. But for Cale, curiosity was a crime. Every question was met with anger. Every request was shot down. Every spark of joy was crushed before it could grow. He wasn't living. He was surviving. The walls around him weren't just physical. They were emotional, invisible chains that kept him trapped in silence and fear. Miss Hargrove's voice echoed from the kitchen, talking on the phone again. She laughed at something her friend said, light and carefree. But with Cale, she was a different person. Cold. Mean. Cruel. He looked down at his hands, small and powerless. The mansion's grandeur mocked him. The expensive furniture, the gold fixtures, the art on the walls, all of it was meaningless. What good was a beautiful cage if you were still a prisoner? What good was wealth if it couldn't buy freedom, kindness, or love? Cale's gaze drifted back to the butterfly. It flew away, disappearing over the garden wall. He wished he could follow it. Wished he could escape. But he couldn't. So he sat there, trapped in silence, waiting for a life that felt like it would never come. 3 days ago, Richard Beaumont had made a promise. "We'll take a walk in the garden this week," he'd said, his hand briefly touching Cale's shoulder. "Just you and me. I promise." Cale had held on to those words like treasure. He'd counted down the hours. Marked the days. Imagined what it would feel like to finally spend time with his father, to feel the sun on his face, to be outside the walls that trapped him. Today was the day. Cale woke up early, his heart racing with excitement. He got dressed faster than usual, positioning his wheelchair near the door. Ready. Waiting. Miss Hargrove noticed immediately. "What are you doing?" she asked, her tone mocking. "Dad promised we'd go to the garden today," Cale said, his voice bright with hope. Miss Hargrove's lips curled into a thin smile. Did he now? She walked away without another word. Cale waited. Minutes turned into an hour. He kept glancing toward the hallway, listening for his father's footsteps. Every sound made his heart jump. Every voice made him sit up straighter. But Richard didn't come. Miss Hargrove passed by again, deliberately slow. She glanced at Cale, then at the door, then back at him. "Still waiting?" she asked sweetly. Cale nodded, refusing to give up hope. "Your father's busy," she said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "Very important meeting. He won't be coming." "But he promised," Cale whispered. "Promises don't mean much when you're rich and powerful," Miss Hargrove said with a shrug. "You'll learn that eventually." She walked away, leaving Cale alone by the door. He stared at the entrance, his hands gripping the wheelchair rim so tight they hurt. Another hour passed. Then another. The clock on the wall ticked loudly, each second a reminder that his father wasn't coming. Cale's excitement slowly crumbled into disappointment. Then sadness. Then something worse, acceptance. This wasn't the first broken promise. It wouldn't be the last. Finally, the front door opened. Cale's heart leaped. Richard walked in, phone pressed to his ear, briefcase in hand. He was dressed in an expensive suit, his face focused, intense. "Dad!" Cale called out, his voice cracking with hope. Richard glanced at him briefly. His eyes registered recognition but nothing more. He covered the phone's microphone. "Not now, Cale. I have urgent business." And just like that, he walked past. Down the hall. Into his office. The door closed with a soft click. Cale sat frozen by the entrance, his wheelchair facing the now empty hallway. The garden was right outside. 10 feet away. Close enough to see the flowers, smell the fresh air, hear the birds singing. But it might as well have been 1,000 miles. Miss Hargrove reappeared, her smile victorious. "Told you," she said simply. Cale didn't respond. He couldn't. The lump in his throat was too big. He slowly rolled his wheelchair away from the door, back into the center of the mansion. The broken promise hurt more than hunger. More than Miss Hargrove's cruelty. More than anything physical ever could. Because it taught him something devastating. His father's love couldn't be counted on. Wealth couldn't buy attention. And promises were just words that disappeared like smoke. Cale hugged himself, learning a lesson no child should ever have to learn. He was alone. Truly, completely alone. Cale sat surrounded by toys. Building blocks. Action figures. A remote control car he couldn't use because Miss Hargrove had hidden the batteries. Everything a rich kid could want. Everything except what he actually needed. His favorite building blocks were missing. Miss Hargrove had taken them yesterday as punishment for knocking over a glass of water. An accident. But accidents didn't matter to her. Cale tried to build a tower with what was left. His small hands stacked the pieces carefully, one on top of another. But the structure was wrong. Unbalanced. Incomplete. Just like him. The tower collapsed. He tried again. It fell. Again. Fell. Outside, he heard something that made his chest tighten. Laughter. Children's laughter. It drifted through the mansion grounds from somewhere beyond the walls. Probably from the park nearby. Kids running, playing, being normal. Being free. Cale rolled his wheelchair to the window and pressed his forehead against the cold glass. He couldn't see them, but he could hear them. Their joy felt like a knife twisting in his heart. What did it feel like to play with friends? What did it feel like to be wanted? He didn't know. He'd never experienced it. The mansion was his entire world. These walls. These rooms. This silence. Miss Hargrove passed by the doorway and stopped. She saw him at the window, heard the distant laughter, and smiled. Not a kind smile. A cruel one. "Stop daydreaming," she said, her voice sharp and dismissive. "No one out there cares about you anyway. No one cares what you feel." Cale's hands tightened on the windowsill. "They have their own lives," she continued, walking closer. "Their own friends. Their own fun. And you? You're just a boy in a wheelchair who nobody wants to deal with." Her words landed like punches. Cale wanted to scream. Wanted to fight back. Wanted to tell her she was wrong. But deep down, a terrible voice whispered that maybe she was right. Maybe he was unlovable. Maybe his disability made him too much work. Maybe that's why his father stayed away. Miss Hargrove left the room, satisfied with the damage she'd done. Cale stayed at the window, listening to the fading laughter. The children were leaving. Moving on. Living their lives. And he was still here. Trapped. He looked around the room. Gold picture frames. Expensive paintings. Furniture that cost more than most people earned in a year. But it was all hollow. The mansion wasn't a home. It was a prison with expensive bars. He rolled back to his toys and stared at them. They weren't companions. They were just objects. Cold. Lifeless. Silent. Like everything else in this place. Cale picked up a building block and held it in his hand. He wanted to throw it. Wanted to break something. Wanted to make someone feel the pain he felt every single day. But he didn't. Instead, he carefully placed it back down. Because fighting back only made things worse. Silence was safer than protest. Obedience was easier than rebellion. So he swallowed the hurt, buried it deep inside where no one could see it, and sat alone in the center of the room. The laughter outside had stopped completely now. The mansion returned to its natural state. Silence. Cold, suffocating silence. And in that quiet, Cale made a wish he'd made 1,000 times before. He wished someone would see him. Really see him. Not the wheelchair. Not the Beaumont name. Not the burden. Just him. A boy who wanted to be loved. But as the afternoon stretched on and no one came, Cale learned another painful lesson. Wishes didn't come true in golden cages. Cale had learned to read Miss Hargrove's moods. The way she walked told him everything. Heavy footsteps meant anger. Slow, deliberate steps meant she was planning something cruel. Today, her steps were slow. She found him in the hallway, trying to reach the library. He wanted to find a book, something to escape into, a world where he wasn't trapped and alone. Miss Hargrove blocked his path. "Going somewhere?" she asked, her voice low and dangerous. "I just wanted a book," Cale said quietly. She crouched down, her face level with his. Her eyes were cold, calculating. "Let me tell you something, Cale," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "Something you need to understand." Cale's heart started racing. "Your father doesn't care about you," she said, each word deliberate. "If he did, he'd be here. But he's not, is he?" Cale opened his mouth to protest, but she cut him off. "Friends? You don't have any. You never will. What child wants to play with someone in a wheelchair? Someone who can't run, can't play sports, can't do anything normal?" Tears burned in Cale's eyes. "You're nothing but a rich boy trapped in this house," Miss Hargrove continued, her smile cruel. "And if you cry or complain, don't expect anyone to rescue you. Because no one's coming." "That's not true," Cale whispered, his voice cracking. "Isn't it?" She stood up, looking down at him. "Your father works 16-hour days. He travels constantly. He has meetings, dinners, conferences. And you? You're just another item on his to-do list. One he keeps forgetting about. Cale's chest felt tight, like he couldn't breathe. Miss Hargrove leaned against the wall, examining her nails casually. You think anyone cares if you fall? If you get hurt? If you fail? She paused, letting the words sink in. They don't. Only you can deal with it. Only you. No one else will help you. Not your father. Not anyone. Do you understand? Cale nodded slowly, unable to speak. His throat was too tight, his heart too heavy. Good, Miss Hargrove said, satisfied. Now go back to your room. And remember, complaining only makes things worse for you. She walked away, her heels clicking against the marble floor. Cale sat frozen in the hallway, her words echoing in his mind. Part of him wanted to believe she was lying. That his father did care. That someone would come for him if he really needed help. But another part, the part that had been growing stronger each day, wondered if she was right. His father's absences weren't accidents. They were choices. The broken promises weren't mistakes. They were patterns. The isolation wasn't unfortunate. It was intentional. Miss Hargrove's cruelty had a terrible power. It didn't just hurt his body or take away his things. It poisoned his mind. It made him doubt himself. Question his worth. Believe that maybe, just maybe, he deserved this treatment. That maybe he was the problem. Cale slowly rolled back toward his room, his movements mechanical, defeated. The mansion felt colder than ever. Every gold fixture, every expensive painting, every piece of luxury mocked him. What good was wealth when it couldn't protect you from cruelty? What good was a family name when your family didn't want you? But deep inside, beneath the pain and fear and doubt, something tiny remained. A flicker. A spark. A stubborn, burning hope that refused to die completely. Cale didn't know it yet, but that tiny ember would soon become his salvation. He just had to survive long enough to find it. Cale had been watching the garden all morning. Through the massive windows, he could see everything. The grass. The flowers. The birds hopping from branch to branch. Freedom was right there. Just beyond the glass. So close he could almost taste it. Miss Hargrove sat in the next room, distracted by her phone. He could hear her laughing, talking to a friend, completely absorbed in her conversation. This was his chance. Maybe his only chance. Cale's heart pounded as he slowly, quietly, rolled his wheelchair toward the door. Every movement felt loud. Every turn of the wheel sounded like thunder in his ears. He kept his eyes on Miss Hargrove through the doorway. She wasn't looking. She was facing away, phone pressed to her ear. Just a little further. The door was 10 feet away. Then 5. Then 3. Cale's hands moved faster on the rims, his breath coming quick and shallow. He could see the garden path through the glass. Smell the fresh air seeping through the crack. Almost there. His fingers touched the door handle. What do you think you're doing? Miss Hargrove's voice exploded behind him like a gunshot. Cale froze, his hand still on the handle. She appeared beside him in an instant, her face twisted with fury. Her hands grabbed the back of his wheelchair and yanked it backward violently. Cale's body jolted. His head snapped back. Pain shot through his neck. You can't go out there, she screamed, spinning his wheelchair to face her. Are you trying to embarrass yourself? To embarrass me? I just wanted. I don't care what you wanted. She leaned down, her face inches from his. You don't get to make decisions. You don't get to do whatever you want. Do you understand? Tears blurred Cale's vision. Answer me, she demanded. Yes, he whispered. Yes, what? Yes, I understand. Miss Hargrove straightened up, smoothing her shirt. Good. Now get back to the center of the room and stay there. Cale didn't move fast enough. She grabbed his wheelchair and pushed him roughly across the floor, wheels squeaking against the marble. She positioned him in the center of the room, far from any doors or windows. Don't move, she ordered. Not an inch. Then she walked away, back to her phone, back to her conversation, back to pretending he didn't exist. Cale sat motionless, staring at the door he'd been so close to reaching. The garden that had been within his grasp now felt miles away. His chest ached with something deeper than physical pain. It was the crushing weight of helplessness. The suffocating reality that he had no control over his own life. He couldn't leave. Couldn't explore. Couldn't experience even the simplest freedom. The mansion wasn't just his home. It was his cage. And Miss Hargrove was the warden who made sure he never forgot it. Minutes passed. Then an hour. Cale remained in the center of the room, exactly where she'd left him. He didn't dare move. Didn't dare try again. Because trying only brought pain. Hoping only brought disappointment. Fighting only made things worse. So he sat there, surrounded by gold and luxury and wealth that meant absolutely nothing. A prisoner in paradise. A bird with clipped wings in a gilded cage. Outside, the sun shone bright and warm. The birds sang. The world continued, alive and beautiful and free. But inside these walls, time stood still. And Cale was trapped. The door he'd almost reached seemed to mock him now. It wasn't locked. It wasn't even guarded. But it might as well have been a fortress wall. Because Miss Hargrove's cruelty was a stronger barrier than any lock could ever be. Comment freedom if you're rooting for Cale to escape this nightmare. Hit subscribe, you won't believe who saves him next. And Cale was learning a terrible truth. Sometimes the worst prisons aren't made of bars. They're made of fear. We're going to the park today. Richard's words had come suddenly that morning. No explanation. No warmth. Just a statement. Cale's heart had leaped. The park. Outside. Real freedom, even if just for an hour. But Miss Hargrove's face had darkened immediately. The park, she'd said, her voice dripping with disgust. Those paths are muddy. Dirty. Full of messy children running around. Richard hadn't even looked up from his phone. Take him. I'll meet you there in an hour. Now they were here. The park stretched out before them, green and alive. Children played on swings. Families sat on benches. Dogs ran through the grass. Everything Cale had dreamed about. But Miss Hargrove's mood was poisonous. She pushed his wheelchair with rough, jerky movements. Every bump felt intentional. Every turn was too sharp. This is a waste of time, she muttered under her breath. Dragging a wheelchair through dirt. As if you can actually enjoy this. Cale ignored her, his eyes wide, taking in everything. The trees. The sky. The sounds of life happening all around him. It was beautiful. Miss Hargrove stopped abruptly at a narrow trail. Cale looked ahead and his stomach dropped. The path was covered in puddles. Thick, dark mud lined both sides. It looked dangerous. Unstable. Miss Hargrove, maybe we should take a different path. This is the path, she said coldly. You wanted to come to the park. This is what parks look like. She positioned his wheelchair at the entrance to the trail and stepped back. Go ahead, she said, crossing her arms. Or are you too scared? Cale's hands trembled on the rims. The mud looked deep. The wheels would sink. He knew it. I don't think I can. Of course you can't, Miss Hargrove interrupted, pulling out her phone. You can't do anything. But you insisted on coming here, so go. Her eyes gleamed with something cruel. Something calculated. She wanted this. Cale realized it too late. She wanted him to fail. Wanted him to struggle. Wanted to prove that he was helpless, useless, incapable. Go, she repeated, her voice sharp. Cale took a shaky breath and pushed forward. The front wheels hit the mud immediately. They sank. Not just a little. They sank deep, swallowed by the thick earth. Cale pushed harder, his small hand straining against the rims. But the wheels wouldn't move. They spun uselessly, digging deeper instead of pushing forward. Panic flared in his chest. Miss Hargrove, I'm stuck. She didn't move. She stood there, phone in hand, watching him struggle. No. Not just watching. Filming. Cale saw the phone pointed at him, saw the small red recording light. She was recording his struggle. Help. Cale's voice cracked. Please, I can't. Try harder, she said flatly, still filming. Use your arms. Isn't that what you're supposed to do? Tears stung his eyes as he pushed again. And again. The wheelchair rocked but didn't move. The mud held it tight, like hands pulling him down. His arms burned. His chest heaved. Sweat dripped down his face despite the cool air. Please, he begged. Please help me. Miss Hargrove smiled. Not a kind smile. A satisfied smile. She'd gotten exactly what she wanted. People walked past. Joggers. Dog walkers. Families. Some glanced over. Some slowed down. But no one stopped. No one helped. And Miss Hargrove just kept filming, her expression cold and victorious. Cale's arms gave out. He slumped forward in his wheelchair, exhausted, defeated, trapped. The park that had seemed so beautiful moments ago now felt like a nightmare. And the worst part? His father was supposed to meet them here. Supposed to arrive any minute. But Cale knew the truth now. No one was coming to save him. Not his father. Not Miss Hargrove. No one. He was alone. Completely alone. The front wheels sank deeper. Cale pushed with everything he had left, but the mud was relentless. It pulled at the wheelchair like quicksand, dragging him down instead of letting him move forward. His arms screamed in pain. His hands were raw from gripping the rims so tight. Please, he gasped, his voice barely a whisper now. Someone, help. Miss Hargrove stood 10 feet away, phone still recording. Her face showed no concern. No guilt. Just cold satisfaction. Maybe if you tried harder, she said loud enough for others to hear, you wouldn't need so much help all the time. Her words were designed to shame him. To make any potential helper think twice. A jogger passed by, slowing down. His eyes met Cale's. Cale's heart jumped with hope. But the jogger glanced at Miss Hargrove, saw her calm expression, and kept running. If the adult wasn't worried, why should he be? A woman walking her dog stopped next. She frowned, looking at the wheelchair trapped in mud. Is he okay? She asked Miss Hargrove. He's fine, Miss Hargrove replied smoothly. Just learning a lesson about being more careful. The woman hesitated, then nodded and walked away. Cale's hope shattered. No one was going to help. They all saw Miss Hargrove standing there, calm and collected. They assumed everything was under control. That this was intentional. A teaching moment. They didn't see the cruelty. The calculated abuse. The way she was enjoying his suffering. Another family walked past. A couple. 3 teenagers on bikes. An elderly man with a cane. All of them looked. All of them saw. None of them stopped. Cale's chest tightened. His breathing became shallow, panicked. The wheelchair tilted slightly as one wheel sank deeper than the other. For a terrifying second, Cale thought he might tip over completely. "Help!" he screamed, his voice cracking with desperation. "Please! Someone help me!" Miss Hargrove zoomed in with her phone, capturing every moment of his breakdown. Tears streamed down Cale's face. His whole body shook. This was it. This was how he'd be remembered. Not as a person. Not as a child who deserved love and care. As a spectacle. A moment of entertainment for Miss Hargrove's cruelty. The park, filled with life and movement and people, became a silent graveyard around him. Everyone was too busy. Too uncomfortable. Too willing to believe that someone else would handle it. Cale's arms gave out completely. He slumped forward, exhausted, defeated. He'd tried everything. Screamed. Begged. Fought. Nothing worked. The mud held him prisoner, just like the mansion did. Just like Miss Hargrove did. Just like his father's neglect did. He was trapped. Always trapped. Then, from the corner of his eye, he saw movement. Different movement. Not someone walking past. Not someone glancing and continuing. Someone running. Straight toward him. Cale lifted his head, vision blurred by tears. A figure cut through the wet grass, moving fast. Determined. Fearless. Not an adult. A kid. A girl. She didn't slow down. Didn't hesitate. Didn't look at Miss Hargrove for permission or explanation. She just ran. Her shoes hit the mud with a splash. She didn't care. Didn't even flinch as the thick earth splattered across her clothes. She reached Cale's wheelchair and grabbed the handles with both hands. "I've got you," she said, her voice steady but breathless. Cale stared at her, too shocked to speak. She was younger than him, maybe by a year. Her skin was dark, her hair pulled back in a ponytail. Her clothes were simple, worn, nothing expensive. But her eyes burned with something Cale had almost forgotten existed. Compassion. "We're getting you out," she said firmly, planting her feet. And together, they began to fight. Sky's hands gripped the wheelchair handles like her life depended on it. "On 3, she said, her voice cutting through Cale's panic. 1, 2, 3. She pulled with everything she had. The wheelchair didn't budge. The mud held tight, sucking at the wheels like a living thing. But Sky didn't give up. She adjusted her stance, planted her feet deeper, and tried again. "Come on," she grunted, straining against the weight and resistance. Cale's hands found the rims again. He pushed while she pulled. Inch by inch, the wheelchair began to move. The mud fought back, making terrible sucking sounds as it released its grip. Sky's shoes sank deeper with every step backward, but she didn't stop. "Almost there," she gasped. "Keep pushing." Cale's arms burned, but he pushed harder than he'd ever pushed before. Not because he was strong. Because someone was finally fighting with him instead of against him. The front wheels broke free with a loud pop. Sky stumbled backward but kept her grip. She dragged the wheelchair another foot, then another, until all the wheels were on solid ground. They both collapsed, breathing hard. Cale stared at her, unable to form words. Mud covered her completely. Her shoes were destroyed. Her jeans were soaked. Her hoodie clung to her arms. She'd ruined her clothes. Her shoes. Everything. For him. A stranger. "You okay?" Skye asked, still catching her breath. Cale nodded, tears streaming down his face again. But this time they weren't tears of fear or hopelessness. They were tears of gratitude. Relief. Disbelief. Someone had come for him. Someone had actually helped. Miss Hargrove's voice shattered the moment. "What do you think you're doing?" she snapped, marching toward them. Her phone was finally down, her face twisted with irritation. Skye stood up, placing herself between Miss Hargrove and Cale. "He was stuck," Skye said simply. "I helped him." "No one asked for your help," Miss Hargrove shot back. "This is none of your business." "He was screaming for help," Skye replied, her voice calm but firm. "That makes it everyone's business." Miss Hargrove's face reddened. She wasn't used to being challenged. Especially not by a child. "You've ruined your clothes for nothing," Miss Hargrove said coldly. "He was fine. I was handling it." "You were filming him," Skye said flatly. The words hung in the air like an accusation. Miss Hargrove's mouth opened, then closed. For the first time, she had no response. A car pulled up to the curb. Sleek. Black. Expensive. Richard Beaumont stepped out, his phone pressed to his ear as always. But when he saw the scene, he froze. Cale, covered in mud, tears on his face. Skye, soaked and filthy, standing protectively beside him. Miss Hargrove, phone in hand, guilt written across her features. Richard's expression shifted from confusion to shock to something darker. "What happened here?" His voice was quiet but sharp. Miss Hargrove straightened, trying to regain control. "Nothing, sir. Just a small incident. Everything's under control." "He was stuck in the mud," Skye interrupted, her voice cutting through the lies. "For a long time. She didn't help him. She just recorded it." Richard's eyes went to Miss Hargrove's phone. Then to his son's terrified face. The pieces clicked into place. "Is this true?" Richard asked, his voice dangerously low. Miss Hargrove opened her mouth, scrambling for an excuse, but nothing came out. The silence was her answer. Richard's jaw clenched. His hands formed fists at his sides. For the first time in years, he saw his son. Really saw him. Not as an obligation. Not as a task to delegate. Not as something to be managed. As a child who had been suffering. Alone. Afraid. Neglected. And the only person who had shown courage wasn't someone he paid. It wasn't someone trained. It wasn't even an adult. It was a young girl who had nothing. Who owed them nothing. Who risked everything to do what was right. Richard knelt beside Cale, his voice shaking. "I'm so sorry." Skye stepped back, giving them space. She didn't need recognition. Didn't need reward. She had done the unthinkable simply because it was right. And in that moment, everything changed. Type hero if Skye's courage gave you chills. Subscribe now, the father's reaction in the next scene will shock you. Richard Beaumont stood frozen, his expensive suit suddenly feeling like a costume. Everything he thought he knew was crumbling. His eyes moved across the scene again. Cale's wheelchair, caked in mud. His son's tear-stained face. The girl covered in filth who had done what no one else would. And Miss Hargrove, standing there with her phone, caught. "Get in the car," Richard said to Cale, his voice hollow. Skye helped push the wheelchair toward the Mercedes. Richard watched her struggle with the uneven ground, this young girl who'd already given so much, still giving more. He should have been the one helping. He should have been there. But he wasn't. He was never there. The realization hit him like a freight train. Richard looked at Miss Hargrove. Really looked at her. The woman he'd trusted with his son's care. The woman he'd paid generously. The woman who'd had complete access to Cale while he was busy building his empire. How long? Richard asked quietly. Sir, I don't know what you... How long has this been happening? Miss Hargrove's composure cracked. Nothing was happening. He got stuck in mud. Children get stuck sometimes. You were filming him. Richard's voice was like ice. While he screamed for help. While he struggled. You stood there and filmed. I was documenting. You were enjoying it. The words landed like a slap. Miss Hargrove's face went pale. Richard pulled out his own phone. Show me yours. Excuse me? Your phone. Show me. Now. Miss Hargrove clutched it tighter. This is my personal property. You're fired, Richard said flatly. Hand over the phone, or I'll have the police retrieve it as evidence of child endangerment. The threat worked. Miss Hargrove's hands shook as she unlocked the device and handed it over. Richard scrolled through the video. His stomach turned. The footage showed everything. Cale's panic. His desperate cries for help. The people walking past. And Miss Hargrove's voice, cold and mocking, telling him to try harder. Richard's grip tightened on the phone. His jaw clenched so hard it hurt. This wasn't just today. This was every day. This was months, maybe years, of his son suffering while he was too busy to notice. Too important to care. Too focused on money to see what really mattered. He looked at Cale, now sitting in the car, Sky beside him. His son looked small. Fragile. Broken. Richard had done this. Not Miss Hargrove. Not alone, anyway. He had created the environment where this could happen. Where cruelty could thrive in silence. Where his son's cries for help went unheard because no one was listening. Richard's eyes burned. He couldn't remember the last time he'd cried. Probably at his wife's funeral, 5 years ago. After she died, he'd thrown himself into work. Buried his grief in meetings and deals and expansion. He'd convinced himself that providing wealth was the same as providing care. That paying for the best nanny, the best doctors, the best everything meant he was a good father. He'd been wrong. Catastrophically wrong. Sky emerged from the car, her mission complete. She started to walk away, not looking for thanks or reward. Wait, Richard called out. She turned, her expression guarded. What's your name? Sky. Sky, Richard repeated, his voice thick with emotion. Thank you. You saved my son when I... His voice broke. When I wasn't there to do it myself. Sky studied him for a moment. She was young, but her eyes held wisdom beyond her years. He needed someone, she said simply. That's all. The words cut deeper than any accusation could. He needed someone. And Richard hadn't been that someone. A billionaire with unlimited resources, and he couldn't give his son the one thing that mattered most. Presence. How can I repay you? Richard asked. Sky glanced at her ruined shoes, then back at him. Just take care of him. Really take care of him. She walked away before Richard could respond. He stood there in the park, his world shattered, finally understanding what he'd lost. And what he needed to fight to get back. His son's trust. The mansion felt different when they returned. Colder. Darker. Like the walls themselves were holding secrets. Richard had driven in complete silence. Cale sat in the back, still trembling, still processing everything that had happened. Miss Hargrove had taken a separate car, summoned by Richard with a single text, "My office." Now she stood before his desk, her composure barely holding. Richard didn't sit. He paced, his mind racing through every interaction, every moment he dismissed as normal. "How long have you been treating my son this way?" His voice was controlled but dangerous. Miss Hargrove lifted her chin. "I don't know what you mean. I've provided excellent care." "Excellent care?" Richard's voice rose. "You left him stuck in mud while you filmed him. He needed to learn." "Learn what?" "That no one cares if he suffers." Miss Hargrove's mask slipped. "He's a rich child, Mr. Beaumont. He has everything. A mansion. Toys. The best medical care. He doesn't need coddling on top of all that. He's a child." Richard slammed his hand on the desk. "A child who needs care. Attention. Love." "Love?" Miss Hargrove laughed bitterly. "You're one to talk about love. When was the last time you spent more than 5 minutes with him?" The accusation hung in the air. Richard's jaw tightened. "That's not." "It's exactly the point," Miss Hargrove continued, emboldened by his silence. "You hired me to do a job you didn't want to do yourself. Feed him. Dress him. Keep him occupied. You didn't want a caregiver. You wanted him managed. Handled. Out of your way." Richard's fists clenched. She was right. And that made it worse. "So I managed him," Miss Hargrove said coldly. "I kept him quiet. Kept him from bothering you. Kept him from making demands you didn't want to meet. That's what you paid me for." "I paid you to care for him." "No," Miss Hargrove said sharply. "You paid me to make him invisible." The word struck like lightning. Richard stared at her, seeing clearly for the first time. She wasn't just cruel. She was a mirror reflecting his own failures back at him. "Cale cried for you," Miss Hargrove continued. "Every day. Asked when you'd come home. When you'd play with him. When you'd keep your promises." Richard's chest tightened. "And every day, I had to be the one to tell him you were too busy. Too important. Too unavailable. Do you know what that does to a child?" "Stop," Richard whispered. "He stopped asking eventually," Miss Hargrove said, her voice quieter now. "Stopped hoping. That's when I knew you'd succeeded. You'd trained him to expect nothing from you." I said stop. But she wouldn't. The dam had broken. So yes, I was harsh with him. Because someone had to prepare him for reality. The reality that his father doesn't care. That wealth doesn't equal love. That he's alone. Richard's hands trembled. "Get out." "Gladly." Miss Hargrove grabbed her bag. "But firing me doesn't change anything. You're still the same man who ignored his son for years. Still the same father who chose board meetings over bedtime stories." She walked toward the door, then paused. "That girl saved him today," she said without turning around. "A stranger did what you should have done. What you've always should have done." The door closed behind her with a soft click. Richard stood alone in his office, surrounded by awards and achievements and symbols of success. All of it meaningless. He sank into his chair, burying his face in his hands. Miss Hargrove was wrong about one thing. Firing her did change something. It meant Richard could no longer hide behind excuses. No longer blame someone else. No longer pretend the problem was just a bad employee. The problem was him. And for the first time in years, Richard Beaumont, master of business, controller of millions, builder of empires, felt completely powerless. Because the one thing that mattered most, he'd already lost. His son's trust. And he had no idea how to get it back. Richard sat alone in his office for 20 minutes. Then he did something he'd never done before. He went looking for his son. Not to check on him quickly. Not to ask someone else how he was doing, but to actually find him, sit with him, and listen. He found Cale in his room, staring out the window. The same window he'd pressed his face against countless times, wishing for freedom. "Cale?" Richard's voice was soft, uncertain. Cale turned slightly but didn't speak. Richard wheeled a chair over and sat down, eye level with his son. The position felt foreign, vulnerable. "I need to see something," Richard said gently. "Miss Hargrove's phone. The video from today. I need to watch it with you. I need to understand." Cale's eyes widened with fear. "Dad, you don't have to." "Yes, I do." Richard pulled out Miss Hargrove's phone. His hands shook as he pressed play. The video started with Cale's wheelchair approaching the muddy path. The camera was steady, deliberate. Miss Hargrove had framed it perfectly, like she was documenting something entertaining. Cale's voice came through the speaker. "Miss Hargrove, maybe we should take a different path. This is the path. You wanted to come to the park. This is what parks look like." Richard's jaw clenched. The wheelchair entered the mud. The wheels sank immediately. Cale struggled, his small arms straining. "Miss Hargrove, I'm stuck. Try harder. Use your arms. Isn't that what you're supposed to do?" Richard's stomach turned. The video continued. Cale's panic escalated. His cries for help became desperate. People passed by, glanced, kept walking. And Miss Hargrove just filmed. Silent. Watching. Enjoying. Richard saw his son's face collapse into tears. Saw the moment hope died in his eyes. Saw him slump forward in defeat. Then Sky appeared on screen, running through the mud without hesitation. The video ended. Richard sat frozen, the phone trembling in his hand. He'd seen it earlier, but watching it with Cale beside him made it unbearable. This wasn't just footage. This was his son's suffering, captured and preserved. "Cale," Richard's voice broke. I had no idea. "I tried to tell you," Cale whispered. The words hit like a hammer. "When?" Richard asked, though he dreaded the answer. "Lots of times. But you were always busy. Always on calls. Always leaving." Richard's eyes burned with tears. "What else did she do?" Cale hesitated, his small hands clutching the armrests of his wheelchair. "Tell me," Richard said gently. "Please. I need to know." The floodgates opened. Cale told him everything. The cold breakfasts. The punishments for curiosity. The isolation. The threats. The lies she'd planted in his mind, that no one cared, that he was a burden, that he deserved to be alone. Every word was a dagger in Richard's heart. "She said you didn't want me around," Cale said quietly. "That I was just another thing on your to-do list. Something you kept forgetting about." Richard closed his eyes, tears spilling down his cheeks. "She said I'd never have friends because of my wheelchair. That I was too much work. That no one would ever really want me." "Stop," Richard whispered, but Cale kept going. "She took my favorite toys as punishment. Hid my building blocks. Made me sit in the center of rooms so I couldn't reach anything. She said I was useless. That I ruined everything I touched." Richard pulled Cale close, wrapping his arms around his son for the first time in months. Maybe years. "I'm so sorry," Richard sobbed. "I'm so sorry." Cale remained stiff in his arms, unsure how to respond. This man had been absent for so long, his sudden presence felt strange. "I should have been here," Richard said, pulling back to look at his son. "I should have noticed. Should have listened. Should have protected you." Cale's lower lip trembled. Why didn't you? The question was simple but devastating. Richard had no good answer. No excuse that would make it right. Because I was a coward, he said finally. I was afraid of failing you. So I threw money at the problem instead. Hired someone else. Convinced myself that providing wealth was the same as providing love. It's not, Cale said softly. I know that now. They sat in silence, the weight of lost time pressing down on both of them. Finally, Richard spoke again. I can't undo what happened. Can't erase the pain. But I promise you, from this moment forward, I will be here. Really here. Cale looked at him, searching his father's face for truth. Do you believe me? Richard asked. Cale didn't answer. But he didn't pull away either. And for now, that was enough. Richard didn't sleep that night. He sat in his office, replaying every memory, every missed moment, every time he'd chosen work over his son. The sunrise found him at Cale's door, waiting. When Cale woke, Richard was there. Not Miss Hargrove. Not a stranger. His father. Good morning, Richard said softly. Cale blinked, confused. His father never came to his room in the morning. I thought we could have breakfast together, Richard continued. Just us. What do you want? Cale stared at him, waiting for the catch. The phone call that would interrupt. The meeting that would pull him away. Anything, Richard said. Whatever you want. Pancakes? Cale asked hesitantly. With strawberry jam? Pancakes with strawberry jam it is. Richard didn't call the cook. He went to the kitchen himself, fumbling with ingredients, burning the first batch, starting over. Cale wheeled into the kitchen, watching in amazement. His father, the man who commanded boardrooms and controlled millions, was making pancakes. Badly. But trying. These might not be great, Richard admitted, flipping a lopsided pancake. I haven't cooked in years. It's okay, Cale said quietly. They sat together at the small kitchen table, not the formal dining room. Richard had pulled his chair close, no distance between them. The pancakes were slightly burned and weirdly shaped. But Cale ate them like they were the best meal he'd ever had. Because they were made with something money couldn't buy. Effort. Time. Presence. Cale, Richard said, setting down his fork. I want to tell you something important. Cale looked up, syrup on his chin. Yesterday, I fired Miss Hargrove. She's never coming back. Ever. Cale's shoulders relaxed slightly. A weight he didn't know he was carrying lifted. But firing her isn't enough, Richard continued. I need to fix what I broke. Fix us. And I don't know how to do that. What do you mean? Cale asked. I mean I need your help. I need you to teach me how to be your father again. The words hung in the air, vulnerable and raw. I know I can't erase the past, Richard said. Can't give you back the years I stole. But I can start now. Today. This moment. Cale's eyes glistened with tears. I'm going to clear my schedule, Richard said. Cancel meetings. Delegate projects. Whatever it takes. Because nothing is more important than you. Cale wanted to believe him. But belief required more than words. How do I know you mean it? Cale asked, his voice small. Richard knelt beside the wheelchair, taking his son's hands. Because I'm going to prove it. Every single day. Not with promises. With actions. He paused, meeting Cale's eyes. I'm going to be here for breakfast. Here for lunch. Here for dinner. I'm going to read you stories. Play games. Listen when you talk. Ask about your day. Your fears. Your dreams. Cale's chin trembled. I'm going to take you to the park. The real park, not the muddy nightmare from yesterday. We'll go to museums. Movies. Anywhere you want. What about your work? Cale asked. Work will be there. It'll always be there. But childhood won't. Your childhood. Our chance to be a real family. Richard squeezed his son's hands gently. I can't force you to forgive me. Can't make you trust me overnight. But I'm asking for a chance. Just one chance to show you I've changed. Cale searched his father's face. Behind the expensive suit and powerful presence was something he'd never seen before. Fear. Vulnerability. Genuine love. Okay, Cale whispered. Okay? One chance. Richard's eyes filled with tears. He pulled Cale into a hug, holding him like he was the most precious thing in the world. Because he was. Thank you, Richard whispered into his son's hair. Thank you for giving me another chance. They stayed like that for a long time, two broken people beginning the slow process of healing. Outside, the sun climbed higher, casting warm light through the kitchen windows. The mansion that had felt like a prison was starting to feel different. Not perfect. Not fixed. But hopeful. And for the first time in years, Cale felt something he'd almost forgotten. Safe. The next morning, Richard was there again. And the morning after that. And the one after that. Cale kept waiting for it to stop. For his father to slip back into old patterns. For the phone calls to win. For the meetings to matter more. But they didn't. Richard had meant what he said. On day 3, Richard read Cale a story before bed. His voice was rusty, unpracticed, but Cale didn't care. He listened to every word, watching his father's face, still testing if this was real. On day 5, they played a board game. Richard lost spectacularly, and instead of getting frustrated, he laughed. Actually laughed. Cale had forgotten what his father's laugh sounded like. On day 7, Richard asked a question that changed everything. What scares you most? They were sitting in the garden, the real garden, not behind glass. Cale felt the sun on his face, heard birds singing, smelled flowers blooming. Besides Miss Hargrove? Cale asked. Besides her. Cale thought carefully. That you'll leave again. That this will stop. Richard's chest tightened. But he didn't deflect. Didn't make excuses. That's fair, he said quietly. I've given you every reason to believe that. Will you? Cale asked, turning to look at his father. Leave again? Cale nodded. Richard set down his coffee and turned his chair to face his son directly. Honestly? I don't know what the future holds. I might mess up. Might make mistakes. But I promise you this, I will never abandon you again. Not the way I did before. How do I know? Because I'm not just changing my schedule, Cale. I'm changing me. Richard pulled out his phone, the device that had stolen so much of his attention, and showed Cale his calendar. See this? I blocked off every morning and every evening. Marked them as Cale time. Non-negotiable. My assistant knows. My board knows. Everyone knows. Cale studied the screen, seeing his name repeated across weeks and months. But more than that, Richard continued, I'm learning to listen. Really listen. Not just hear words but understand feelings. He paused, choosing his words carefully. Miss Hargrove taught me something, even though she didn't mean to. She showed me that presence without empathy is worthless. I could be in the same room as you but still miles away if I'm not actually paying attention. Cale absorbed this slowly. So when you talk, Richard said, I'm going to put down my phone. Stop thinking about work. Focus on you. Just you. What if something important happens at work? You're what's important, Richard said firmly. Not contracts. Not deals. Not money. You. The word settled between them like a promise carved in stone. A butterfly landed on Cale's armrest. The same bright orange he'd wanted to see before, when Miss Hargrove had punished his curiosity. Richard noticed Cale's eyes light up. Want to follow it? Richard asked, standing up. Really? Really? They moved through the garden together, Richard pushing the wheelchair slowly, letting Cale lead. The butterfly danced ahead, and they followed, laughing when it landed on a flower just out of reach. It was simple. Ordinary. Nothing expensive or grand. But it was everything. For the first time, Cale felt like his father saw him. Not as a responsibility. Not as a problem to solve. But as a person worth knowing. That evening, Skye appeared at the door. Richard had invited her, wanting to thank her properly. But more than that, he wanted Cale to have a friend. Someone his own age who understood courage and kindness. Cale's face transformed when he saw her. Skye. She smiled, walking in with the same confidence she'd shown in the park. Richard watched them talk, watched Cale laugh freely, watched his son be a kid for the first time in years. And he realized something profound. Wealth had given his son comfort but stolen his childhood. Power had built empires but destroyed relationships. Success had earned respect but cost him love. Skye had nothing compared to Richard's fortune. But she had given Cale something priceless. Hope. Courage. The belief that someone cared. Richard knew he had so much to learn. About empathy. About presence. About being human instead of just being successful. But watching Cale smile, really smile, he knew the lesson was worth it. Richard stepped back, giving Cale and Skye space. He'd never seen his son this comfortable with anyone. Cale's whole body language changed around her. Shoulders relaxed. Smile genuine. Guard down. Want to see my room? Cale asked Skye. Sure. Richard followed at a distance, observing. Skye moved through the mansion without awe or intimidation. The gold fixtures, expensive art, and luxury didn't impress her. She was focused entirely on Cale. In his room, Cale showed her his building blocks. The ones Miss Hargrove had returned after being fired. I used to try building towers, Cale explained. But they always fell. Skye picked up a block, examining it. That's how building works. You try, it falls, you try again. But what if it keeps falling? Then you figure out what's wrong. Maybe the base is weak. Maybe you're rushing. Maybe you need help. She started stacking blocks carefully, showing him. See? Foundation first. Strong bottom, everything else can grow. Cale watched, mesmerized. Life's like that too, Skye continued, still building. You can't rush trust. Can't force it. Gotta build it right. Richard leaned against the doorframe, absorbing every word. Sometimes, Skye said, placing another block, you have to trust someone new to help you. It doesn't mean you're weak. It means you're brave enough to accept help. Cale's voice dropped. But what if they hurt me? Skye paused, meeting his eyes. Some people will. But some won't. And you can't let the bad ones stop you from finding the good ones. How do I know the difference? Time, Skye said simply. Watch what they do, not what they say. Actions always tell the truth. She glanced at Richard meaningfully. Your dad says he's changed. That's good. But words are just the start. Watch what he does. Every day. That's what matters. Richard felt the weight of her gaze. This young girl was holding him accountable in ways no business partner ever had. What if I'm too scared? Cale asked. Sky set down the block she was holding. Being scared is normal. I was scared in that park too. You were? Yeah. I thought maybe I'd make it worse. Maybe I wasn't strong enough. Maybe someone would yell at me. But you did it anyway. Because you needed help more than I needed to feel safe. That's courage, Cale. Doing the right thing even when you're scared. Cale looked at the tower Sky had built. Tall. Steady. Strong. Can I try? He asked. Of course. Cale reached for a block. His hand shook slightly, but he placed it carefully on top. It held. He added another. Still standing. See? Sky smiled. You're already doing it. Building something new. Something better. Richard's throat tightened. The metaphor wasn't lost on him. Cale was rebuilding trust. Rebuilding himself. And Richard had to prove he was a solid foundation, not sand. Sky. Cale asked quietly. Will you really come back? I promise. Miss Hargrove made promises too. Sky's expression hardened. I'm not her. When I say something, I mean it. And if something happens that stops me from coming, I'll tell you. I won't just disappear. Okay. You believe me? Cale studied her face, searching for lies, for cracks, for anything that felt like Miss Hargrove. He found nothing but honesty. Yeah, he said finally. I believe you. Sky grinned. Good. Because you're stuck with me now. Richard spoke for the first time. Sky, thank you. For everything. For saving him. For coming back. For teaching us both. She turned to him, her young face serious again. Just keep showing up, Mr. Beaumont. That's all he needs. Someone who keeps showing up. I will. Every day. Every day. Sky nodded, satisfied. She stood up, brushing off her jeans. I should go. But I'll be back this weekend. We can build more towers. I'd like that, Cale said. As Richard walked Sky to the door, she stopped him. He's fragile right now, she said quietly. Don't break him again. I won't. Good. Because if you do, you'll answer to me. Despite everything, Richard smiled. This fearless girl was protecting his son better than he ever had. Deal. Sky left, her muddy sneakers leaving faint prints on the marble floor. Richard didn't call anyone to clean them. He left them there as a reminder. 2 weeks passed since Sky's visit. Richard kept his promise. Every single day. But Cale still woke up expecting it to end. One morning, Richard found Cale sitting by the window again. The same spot where he used to sit alone, wishing someone would notice him. Bad dream? Richard asked gently. Cale nodded slowly. Want to talk about it? Cale hesitated. Opening up felt dangerous. Every time he'd been vulnerable before, it had been used against him. But Richard waited. Didn't rush. Didn't push. Just sat there, present. I dreamed Miss Hargrove came back, Cale finally said. And you were gone again. Richard's chest tightened. That must have been terrifying. It felt real. I know. Richard moved closer. Can I tell you something? Cale turned to face him. I'm scared too, Richard admitted. Of what? That I've hurt you so badly you'll never trust me again. That I've wasted too much time. That I'm too late. Cale stared at his father, surprised. He'd never heard him admit fear before. But being scared doesn't mean I give up, Richard continued. It means I try harder. Fight harder. Show up harder. What if the dream comes true? Cale asked quietly. It won't. Miss Hargrove is gone. Forever. I made sure of it legally. She can't come near you ever again. But what about you leaving? Richard took Cale's hand. I'm not going anywhere. Even when I mess up, and I will mess up, I'm staying. I'm fighting for us. Cale's eyes filled with tears he'd been holding back. It's okay to be angry at me, Richard said softly. It's okay to not trust me yet. It's okay to test me. I deserve all of it. I want to trust you, Cale whispered. But I'm scared. Then we'll be scared together. And we'll work through it together. Something broke open in Cale's chest. Years of pain, loneliness, and fear poured out in sobs he'd been suppressing for months. Richard pulled him close, holding him while he cried. Not telling him to stop. Not telling him to be strong. Just holding him. I hated you, Cale sobbed into his father's shoulder. I hated that you were never there. That work mattered more. That everyone else got their parents except me. I know, Richard said, his own voice breaking. I'm so sorry. She said you didn't care. That I was a burden. That you wished I wasn't here. That's a lie. A complete lie. Then why weren't you here? The question Richard had been dreading. The one he had no good answer for. Because I was a coward, Richard said honestly. After your mom died, I didn't know how to be both parents. Didn't know how to handle your disability, your needs, your emotions. So I ran. Hid behind work. Convinced myself money could replace presence. Cale pulled back, looking at his father through tear-blurred eyes. But I was wrong, Richard continued. So catastrophically wrong. You didn't need money. You needed me. And I failed you. I needed you so bad, Cale cried. Every day. Every single day. I know. And I'll spend the rest of my life making up for that. They sat together in the morning light, both crying, both broken, both beginning to heal. Tell me what you need, Richard said. Right now. What do you need from me? Cale thought about it. Just stay. Don't leave this room. Don't check your phone. Just stay. Done. Richard stayed. For 2 hours, they sat together. Sometimes talking. Sometimes silent. Sometimes crying. Sometimes just breathing. No phones. No interruptions. No excuses. Just presence. By the time the sun climbed higher, something had shifted. The wounds weren't healed. They were too deep for that. But they had started to close. And for the first time since his mother's death, Cale felt something he thought he'd lost forever. He felt seen. Heard. Valued. He felt like someone's son. Not a burden. Not a task. Not an inconvenience. A son. And that made all the difference. Richard hired a new caregiver. But this time, he was present for every interview. Asked Cale's opinion on each candidate. Made sure his son felt safe. They chose Maria, a woman with kind eyes and a gentle voice who spoke to Cale like a person, not a problem. If she ever makes you uncomfortable, Richard told Cale, you tell me immediately. No waiting. No second chances. Cale nodded, still cautious but hopeful. The first week with Maria was a test. Cale watched her closely, waiting for the mask to slip, for the cruelty to emerge. But it never did. Maria asked what he wanted for breakfast. Respected his numbers. Encouraged his curiosity instead of crushing it. One morning, Cale knocked over a glass of juice. He froze, bracing for the explosion. Maria just smiled. Accidents happen. Let's clean it up together. No yelling. No punishment. No shame. Cale's hands trembled as he helped wipe the table. He kept glancing at her, waiting for the other shoe to drop. It didn't. That night, he told his father, Maria's different. Good different? Yeah. She's nice. Actually nice. Richard felt relief flood through him. I'm glad. Dad? Cale's voice was small. Will you check on her sometimes? Make sure she stays nice? Every day, Richard promised. I'm watching everything now. The days turned into weeks. Richard kept showing up. Breakfast together. Lunch when he could. Dinner always. Bedtime stories became routine. He started taking Cale to therapy. Not just physical therapy for his legs, but therapy for his mind, for the trauma Miss Hargrove had inflicted. Richard attended sessions with him. The therapist asked Cale questions that made him uncomfortable. About fear. About trust. About the voice in his head that said he was worthless. That voice isn't yours, the therapist explained. It's Miss Hargrove's. She planted it there. How do I make it stop? Cale asked. You replace it. With truth. With love. With evidence that contradicts it. Richard squeezed Cale's hand. We'll build that evidence together. They started a new routine. Every night before bed, Richard asked Cale 3 questions. What made you happy today? What made you proud today? What do you need from me tomorrow? The first few nights, Cale struggled to answer. Years of neglect had trained him to dismiss his own needs. But slowly, he learned to speak them. I was happy when Maria let me choose my own clothes. I was proud when I built that tower without it falling. Tomorrow, I need you to take me outside. To the garden. Just us. And Richard delivered. Every single request. One afternoon, they sat in the garden together. The same garden Cale had once begged to visit, only to be denied. Now he was here freely, his father beside him, no punishment, no cruelty. Dad? Cale asked, watching a bird hop across the grass. Yeah? Do you remember when I asked to see the butterfly? Richard's face darkened. Yes. Miss Hargrove said I had no business outside. That I was wasting her time. I'm sorry I wasn't there to stop her. But you're here now. Richard looked at his son, seeing the forgiveness forming slowly, carefully. Am I doing enough? Richard asked. Be honest. Cale thought about it. Really thought about it. You're doing more than enough, he said finally. You're doing what I always wanted. You're being my dad. Richard's eyes burned with tears. That's all I want to be. They sat in comfortable silence, the sun warm on their faces. Sky visited again that weekend. She brought a soccer ball, modified so Cale could play from his wheelchair. The 3 of them played in the garden, laughing when the ball went wild, cheering when Cale scored. Richard watched his son's face transform. Pure joy. Unguarded happiness. This was what childhood should look like. Later, as Sky prepared to leave, she pulled Richard aside. You're doing good, she said simply. You think so? I know so. Cale smiles now. Real smiles. That's because of you. Richard felt something he hadn't felt in years. Pride. Not in business deals or profits. Pride in being a father. That night, as Richard tucked Cale into bed, his son grabbed his hand. "Don't go yet. I'm not going anywhere. I mean ever. Don't go ever." Richard sat on the edge of the bed. "I won't. I promise." Cale studied his face, searching for truth. And he found it. 3 months had passed since the park incident. Cale was different now. Stronger. Not physically, but internally. He'd learned something powerful through all the pain. Survival made you resilient. One afternoon, a boy at the park stared at Cale's wheelchair. His mother pulled him away quickly, whispering something Cale couldn't hear. The old Cale would have shrunk. Would have believed Miss Hargrove's lies, that he was a burden, that nobody wanted him around. But the new Cale sat straighter. "Some people don't understand," Sky said, noticing his reaction. "But that's their problem, not yours." "I used to think I was the problem," Cale admitted. "You're not. You never were." Richard, sitting on a nearby bench, watched his son process this. Watched him choose strength over shame. "Miss Hargrove used to say nobody would want to be my friend because of this." Cale tapped his wheelchair. "Miss Hargrove was a liar," Sky said firmly. "I'm your friend. And this wheelchair doesn't change that." Cale smiled. A real, genuine smile. Later that week, Maria took Cale to a store. A man cut in front of them in line, acting like Cale was invisible. "Excuse me," Cale said, his voice clear and strong. "We were here first." The man turned, startled. "Oh, I didn't see." "You saw," Cale interrupted calmly. "You just didn't think I mattered." Maria's eyes widened. She'd never heard Cale speak up like this. The man's face reddened. He stepped back, embarrassed. "Sorry." In the car afterward, Maria asked, "Where did that come from?" "I'm tired of being invisible," Cale said. "I was invisible in my own home for years. I'm not doing it anymore." When Richard heard the story that night, his heart swelled with pride. His son was finding his voice. "I'm proud of you," Richard said. "For what?" "For standing up. For knowing your worth." Cale looked at his father. "You taught me that. By showing up. By proving I matter." Richard's throat tightened. "You've always mattered. I know that now." The next day, Cale asked Richard something unexpected. "Can I talk to other kids? Kids like me?" "What do you mean?" "Kids who have disabilities. Kids who might feel alone like I did." Richard paused, surprised. "You want to help them?" "Yeah. I know what it's like. Maybe I can make it easier for someone else." Within a week, Richard had arranged for Cale to visit a children's hospital. Cale spoke to kids in wheelchairs, kids with crutches, kids who felt different and alone. "It gets better," Cale told a young girl who reminded him of himself. "Not easier. But better. You learn that you're stronger than you think." "How do you know?" she asked. "Because I survived something terrible. And if I can survive that, you can survive this." The girl's eyes lit up with hope. Richard watched from the doorway, seeing his son transform pain into purpose. This was strength. Real strength. Not the kind that came from money or power. The kind that came from surviving darkness and choosing to bring light to others. That evening, Sky came over with news. "I'm starting a program at my school," she announced. "Teaching kids about helping people with disabilities. About not walking past when someone needs help." "Because of what happened in the park?" Cale asked. "Yeah. I keep thinking about all those people who walked past you. I want to change that." Cale grinned. "That's amazing. You inspired it," Sky said. "Your courage inspired me." "My courage?" You're the one who ran through mud to save me. And you're the one who survived years of abuse and came out kind instead of bitter. That's courage." Richard listened, amazed. These two children had more wisdom than most adults he knew. They'd both experienced hardship. Sky through poverty. Cale through neglect and abuse. But neither let it destroy them. They chose strength. Chose kindness. Chose to make the world better. That night, as Richard tucked Cale in, his son said something profound. "Dad, I'm glad it happened." Richard froze. "What?" "Everything with Miss Hargrove." "I'm glad." "Cale, you don't have to." "No, listen. If it hadn't happened, we wouldn't be here. You wouldn't have changed. I wouldn't have met Sky. I wouldn't know how strong I am." Richard sat down heavily. "That's a very mature way to look at it. I'm not saying it was okay. It wasn't. But I'm not going to let it ruin me. I'm going to let it make me better." Richard pulled his son into a hug, overwhelmed with admiration. "You're stronger than me," he whispered. "No," Cale said. "We're both strong now. Together." And that was the truth. Adversity hadn't broken them. It had rebuilt them into something stronger. 6 months after the park incident, Richard planned something special. A return to the park. The same park. The same path. But this time, everything would be different. "Are you sure about this?" Cale asked when his father told him. "Only if you're ready. We don't have to." Cale thought about it. The park still held painful memories. But it also held something else. The moment his life changed. "I'm ready," he said. They arrived on a sunny Saturday morning. Sky was already there, wearing new sneakers. She'd kept the muddy ones in her closet as a reminder. Maria came too, along with several other families from the hospital program Cale had started visiting. Richard had organized a small gathering. Not for publicity. Not for business. For Cale. The park was alive with people. Some recognized Cale from the news story that had quietly circulated. A video someone had taken, not Miss Hargrove's cruel footage, but one showing Sky's rescue. It had gone viral. Millions of views. Comments calling Sky a hero. Comments praising Cale's resilience. But today wasn't about fame. It was about closure. They walked, and rolled, to the exact spot where Cale had been stuck. The mud had dried. The path had been repaired. The city had even installed a proper accessible route after hearing the story. Cale stared at the ground where his wheelchair had sunk. "This is where I thought everything was over," he said quietly. Sky stood beside him. "This is where everything started." Richard knelt beside his son. "This is where I woke up. Where I finally saw what mattered." Cale looked around at the people gathered. Kids in wheelchairs. Parents who'd heard his story. Strangers who'd been moved to help others after watching Sky's courage. "I want to say something," Cale announced. Everyone quieted. 6 months ago, I was stuck here. Not just in mud. In life. I felt invisible. Worthless. Alone. His voice was steady, strong. "A lot of people walked past me that day. They saw me struggling, but they didn't stop. And I don't blame them. Sometimes people don't know how to help. Or they assume someone else will." He turned to Sky. "But this girl. My best friend, she didn't walk past. She ran toward me. And that changed everything." Sky's eyes glistened. "She taught me that one person caring is enough. One person's courage can save someone. One person's kindness can change a life." The crowd was silent, captivated. My dad made mistakes. Big ones. He wasn't there when I needed him. But he's here now. And that's what matters. People can change. People can grow. People can become who they're supposed to be. Richard's face was wet with tears. So if you see someone struggling, in mud, in life, wherever, don't walk past. Run toward them. Be the person they need. Because you might be the only one. The applause started small, then grew. But Cale wasn't finished. And if you're the person stuck in the mud, hold on. Someone's coming. Maybe not today. Maybe not tomorrow. But someone will see you. Someone will care. Don't give up. The crowd erupted in applause. Children cheered. Parents wiped their eyes. Richard stood and addressed everyone. My son is the bravest person I know. Not because he's in a wheelchair. Not despite it. Just because of who he is. And I'm honored to be his father. He turned to Sky. This young woman showed me what true wealth looks like. Not money. Not power. Courage. Compassion. Action. He pulled out an envelope. Sky, I've set up a scholarship fund in your name. For kids who demonstrate exceptional kindness and bravery. You'll be the first recipient. Sky's mouth dropped open. Mr. Beaumont, I didn't do it for. I know. That's exactly why you deserve it. Sky looked at Cale, who grinned and nodded. Thank you, she whispered. The gathering continued with games, food, and laughter. The park that had once been a place of trauma became a place of celebration. As the sun began to set, Richard, Cale, and Sky sat together on a bench. How do you feel? Richard asked his son. Free, Cale said. Finally free. Sky leaned her head on Cale's shoulder. We did it. You did it, Cale corrected. You saved me. No, Sky said. We saved each other. Richard watched the sun paint the sky in oranges and pinks. 6 months ago, he'd been a man who had everything and nothing. Now he had what mattered. His son's trust. His son's love. His son's forgiveness. The mansion would never be cold again. It was finally a home. Not because of gold or luxury. Because of presence. Love. And courage. Cale looked at his father. Ready to go home, Dad? Yeah. Let's go home. Together, they left the park. Not as broken people haunted by the past. But as a family built on hope, strengthened by adversity, and bound by love. The muddy path was behind them. The future stretched ahead, bright and full of possibility. And for the first time in years, all three of them believed tomorrow would be better than today. Because they'd learned the most important lesson of all. One act of courage could change everything. And love, real, present, consistent love, could heal anything.